So, welcome. Thank you all for being here on this rainy, windy spring day. I think Carol would love this. I think this was just right up her alley. So, as Carol would say, well, hello there. Now, I can't say it exactly as she would, but haven't most of us heard that? And whenever we hear it, I still hear it. I still hear it. So it was her very unique and special greeting. Each and every time she said hello. And my name is Chris McWigan, and I am very honored that Linda asked me to be part of the celebration of Carol's life. And I welcome you all here today on behalf of Linda and Mark and Lorraine and Jack and Andrew and all of Carol's family and friends. So thanks a lot for being here. So if you could just take a moment and we're going to have a prayer. Dear God, please sit with us here in this beautiful space, surrounded by nature and loving family and friends, and help us to remember. Help us to celebrate Carol today and all that she gave of herself. Help us remember the natural peace her presence gave. Help us remember the grace of her heart, the generosity of her spirit, the sincerity of her kindness. Help us remember all the ways you, God, touched the world through Carol's goodness. Amen. So, I think anyone who knows Carol probably knows a little bit about her history and some of her stories and memories. But I did ask Linda to put something together for me to kind of give a little chronology of Carol's life. So, Carol's history. Carol Tim, little Carol Tim.
Carol Whitehead.
Carol Whitehead, okay. So, October 10th, 1944, Emerson and Doris Gunn Whitehead welcomed Carol into the world on her brother Joel's 7th birthday. Carol was the youngest of 5 children: Carlton, Elaine, Emerson, and of course Joel. And the family still today resides in upstate. And they send their love and their thoughts today for someone who couldn't be here today. But you're going to have something in that area at some point. So in 1948, following the tragic death of Carol's father, Emerson, the family moved to Carol's mother, Doris's family farm. And life wasn't easy for them. And a couple of years after moving into the farm, the family barn burned down, right to the ground. So in order to raise money for a new barn, the family had this phenomenal idea to get together and take a trip to New York and go on the game show, Strike It Rich. And lo and behold, they didn't. However, they were so captivating that donations were sent and the barn was rebuilt. Little Carol was fascinated by the hustle and bustle and busyness of New York City. The same year, her sister Elaine was graduating from college in Philadelphia, and Carol was in love with being in these cities. The family had driven down for Elaine's graduation, and during the visit, Carol had, as she would call it, a spark moment. She looked up at the sky and she saw a plane writing in the sky. And she would recall and retell the story saying, "At that moment, I looked up and I knew I was a city girl." So Carol carried that feeling back home and held on to it. And while she was in high school, she confided in a guidance counselor and told her how much she wanted to move to the city one day. And the counselor told Carol not to tell anyone just yet. Hold on to that desire and hold on to that dream. So she began to work at summer camps for weeks at a time to get accustomed to how it would be to live without her mom on her own. And then when she turned 15, she broke the news to her mom. Her mother didn't take the news very well. And she told Carol, although she supported her and accepted her decision once she moved, that she couldn't come back home again. But after graduating high school, she worked in Binghamton, New York, and earned money to save for her move to Philadelphia. And finally, in August of 1962, she packed one suitcase, boarded a bus, and headed to Philadelphia. And Carol had many adventures as a country girl in the city. So a few friends from back home decided they were going to join her and move to the city. And they all moved into an apartment together. Well, it wasn't long before those country girls decided, we're out of here. So they took off and moved back to the country. And they left Carol kind of holding the bag, stuck with a 3-bedroom apartment that she couldn't afford. So she moved into the YWCA on Chestnut Street, and she loved city life. She was friendly and outgoing, as every one of us knows. And she met friends and would often hang out with her friends, eating a lot of Chinese food. And they also loved to get coffee and espresso. There was a place called the Gilded Cage at 21st and Rittenhouse, owned and operated by Esther Halpern, who at the time was a famous folk singer and songwriter from Philadelphia. The Cage was the place to be, a famous coffee house from the 1960s, where folk singers and young artists and writers and students would all gather together. It was the cool place to be. So Carol was really cool. There were guitars and sing-alongs, and Carol also became an activist. She supported civil rights and the marchers and the Freedom Riders, and she was there as they boarded the buses near Rittenhouse Square on their way to the civil rights marches in Washington, D.C. and Alabama. And during this exciting time, she met a man named Graham. But she had her heart broken by Graham because he left and he had to return back to his home country of Canada. But she wasn't that heartbroken because 6 months later, she recovered, pulled herself up, and she met Bernie Timlin at a christening. And they talked for hours and hours the night through. And Carol was fascinated with the conversation. She just felt like they really hit it off. And Bernie asked her for her number. So she gave it to him. And she just thought this was great. So she waited. And waited. And waited. And 6 months later, Bernie called her for a date. He said, hey, do you want to go see The Sound of Music? So their first date was the release of The Sound of Music. And the rest, as they say, is history. They dated for a few years, and they had a short 6-month engagement, and their wedding was huge. They invited absolutely everyone they both knew. It was quite the wedding reception. And then Carol and Bernie had 2 fantastic children, Mark and Linda. Linda will say she's more fantastic than Mark to Carol and Bernie. And Mark and Linda were her blessings, always. Married life wasn't always easy for Carol, but she loved being Mark and Linda's mom, and she decided to be a stay-at-home mom until they went to school. And then she decided she was going to go back to work. But before that, apparently Mark sort of had the inside scoop on some things. And Carol actually smoked for 30 years and tried to hide it from her own mother, your grandma. And in 1990, she finally kicked the habit and felt so good about it, she finally decided she was going to come clean and tell her own mother that she had been smoking. And her mom simply said, I knew all about it. Mark told me when he was 3. God knows what else he told. But so Carol worked for 20 years at Penn Mutual Life and Reliance Standard Life for another 20 years. And then she enjoyed 10 wonderful years of retirement and loved every minute of it before we lost her. She was a lifelong volunteer. Catholic Charities, bingo, making soup for the homeless at St. Francis Mission, Aid for Friends, Meals on Wheels, and St. Lucy's School for the Blind. And an integral part of the democratic process, volunteering without fail every election day to work tirelessly on the election board at the 21st Ward, 26th Division. And anyone from the community who would come up to that table, the first person you would see would be Carol. And she didn't even have to ask your name. She probably knew each and everyone's name to sign you in. And those were great days. We'd laugh and laugh. Carol met and treasured many lifelong friends in all the groups that she belonged to. And Al-Anon was very important to her, and she remained a very active member up until November of 2020. So I have to say, Carol Timlin was one of the most generous and giving people that I have ever met in my life. And I would give a clap to that. And when she was cooking massive pots of soup to take to the homeless shelter or missions, or taking care of stray dogs and cats or birds, or adopting the best dogs and giving them loving, caring, and wonderful homes, whatever it was, that was her heart. Running folks to doctor appointments, or doing a little shopping for them, or if you had an emergency and you said, listen, I need somebody to take me somewhere, she dropped everything and she would go. I always remember her working in her garden. And Carol was a short little person. And I wouldn't see her over the porch sometimes, and I would come out in the morning and she'd say, well, hello there. And one day I came out and she was, I guess, in her little flower bed there, and she said, can you give me a hand? And I said, okay, and I looked over. She was sitting on her garden stool, and she'd fallen off, and I said, who falls off? Like a foot into the garden, but she did. But she was a blessing for anyone and everyone that had the good fortune to know her. And one of the blessings that I've had as a neighbor and a friend of Carol's on Houghton Street over the years is the way that we shared many, many Houghton Street incidents and adventures. And I'd like to share just a few with you. As I said, we all would take care of feral cats. And we had a feral cat colony. There was about 4 of them in the back. And our one neighbor, Betty, took care of them for a while. And then when Betty moved, Carol and I and Linda, had care, custody, and control of them. These were the best, most spoiled feral cats I have ever met in my life. 14 years they lived. So there were 4, and then we were down to 3. And then I was down the shore, and I got a call from Carol. And she said, listen, I hate to tell you, but one of the cats was hit by a car and was out on Roxborough Avenue. And a neighbor came and got me, so I went up and I looked, and she said, sure enough, it was, and I'm not sure which one it was, Zeke or whoever, it was one of the orange tabbies. So she lovingly and carefully put Zeke in a bag and took him to a really sweet spot and buried him. And I got home the next day, and it was sad because the other 2 were out there, and you could tell they missed the 3rd one. And dawn was just starting to happen, and the lights were just starting to come up. And I looked at the back of the yard, and I see 2 glowing eyes just staring at me. And I looked, I said, Jesus, I think that's the other cat. I called Carol, and I said, Carol, are you sure he was dead? Oh yeah, he was dead. Absolutely, put him in a bag, buried him, well, he wasn't dead. Or he was referred to as a ghost cat. So she went back over to where she buried him. Sure enough, the little grave was open and the bag was ripped, and somehow he made his way back. So, every now and then things would happen. You know how your neighbors will call you and say, hey, do you have a cup of sugar? Do you have, some whatever? Carol called me, and she would call and she would say, do you happen to have a quart can of semi-gloss almond colored paint? And I did. So anyway, I am sure many of you have many, many stories, and I would invite you now, if you have some stories or you just have something to say or want to share a memory, if you could join me up here and maybe do that.
Do you need to go first? Do you want to go?
Who's first?
My cousin Jean has something to
Cousin
read.
Jean.
Yeah.
This is going to be like American Dance Day. Cousin Jeannie, South Philly. No, we're on.
She is from South. I know something.
Oh, you are? Okay. Thank you.
Marie Goretti.
Maria Goretti.
Goretti, yes.
A Goretti girl. So,
Yes.
all right.
A lot of people are probably saying it's already going. I wanted to do a reading and then just share some memories. When I have moved beyond you in the adventure of life,
Gather in some pleasant place and there remember me, with spoken words old and new. Let a tear if you will, but let a smile come quickly, for I have loved the laughter of life. Do not linger too long with your solemnities. Go eat and talk, and when you can, follow a woodland trail, climb a high mountain, walk along the wild seashore, chew the thoughts of some book which challenges your soul. Use your hands some bright day to make a thing of beauty, or to lift someone's heavy load. Though you mention not my name, though no thought of me crosses your mind, I shall be with you, for these have been the realities of my life for me. And when you face some crisis with anguish, when you walk alone with courage, when you choose your path of right, I shall be very close to you. I have followed the valleys. I have climbed the heights of life. I thought that was very, very much like Aunt Carol. I have memories of my Aunt Carol going back to the earliest days that I can remember. All of them were really great memories. Memories as the young flower girl in their wedding, who spilled orange soda down her lime green gown. Memories of going to the mummers parade and then back to their apartment for hot chocolate. Memories of making Christmas tree ornaments and cookies from scratch that we then decorated. My mom was not at all crafty and was glad Aunt Carol was capable of doing these things with us. Memories of early days on Ormond Street playing in the basement in a shopping cart and never getting in trouble. Memories of doing dishes after a holiday dinner and rehashing the day with the ladies. And of course, so many memories of just time spent with Mark and Linda and Aunt Carol and Uncle Bernie and my family that just, you know, we could never get enough of that. We spent a lot of time together and was so grateful for being able to do that. And Carol always treated me like a human being, not a child. She spoke to me like I was capable of understanding important concepts, and she believed in telling the truth. She never sugarcoated anything, but she imparted everything with great care. She was the type of adult you could talk to about anything and know it would stay with her. And she would do her best to help you figure any problem out. Things of joy and things of sorrow were all discussed and treated with meaning and concern. I miss Aunt Carol, and it often seems like she's just away somewhere because of the weirdness of the last couple of years. Sometimes an old Facebook post will pop up, and there she is. And I think, oh, Aunt Carol just like this. But no, it's from the past. Then I realize how fortunate I am that she still makes her presence known, and that she put herself out there for all of us to hold on to forever that way. I hope we all know what better people we are for having had Aunt Carol in our lives.
You don't have to come up. If you want to say something back there, we can bring a microphone or...
Would someone like to say something? One thing I do want to ask, which of the boys is the youngest?
Andrew.
Okay, I'll just share one quick thing. I know when Andrew was born, I got a call. She said,
We just had our second grandson, and here I am in Alcatraz. And she was in. So your grandmother was in prison when you were born. You want to do it from there, or come up? What's your name?
Josie.
Josie. You're not from South Philly, right?
No.
Oh.
I didn't know Carol well, but I knew her because my mom lived at the Atrio where Linda works. And I just want to say what a good friend that she was to my mother, and that my mother was a little quirky. She just really got my mother. And when I heard the news of her passing, I just let out an audible gasp because I just couldn't believe it. I was just so sad. So and I'm really glad to know Linda, because Linda's a very special person too.
Here comes trouble.
Yes.
Another Carol.
Trouble will make you all cry.
Do you want to take it?
Is this microphone on?
Yes.
It sounded like in the back.
No, it's on.
It's okay.
Do you want me to hold it? I didn't hear it.
Put it on speaker. I did. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Stop.
Okay. Hang on.
This is high tech.
I'm not sure if this is the number, but I don't even know why I did it. I'm fine, everything's good, it's just the memory's going bad. I'll talk to you later, have a good day.
Anyone else? Got some? More? Linda?
I'll tell a quick story about when she was another kid. Are you coming up? Okay, good.
Hi there all, my name is Simon Bonifant, and I knew Carol when she volunteered at St. Lucy's School for the Blind. That was many years ago, a long time ago, and I was really close with her at that time. She was always a very good friend to me. She was a very wise person, and always very kind. And I had kept in touch with her through Facebook here and there over the years, and I just want to say that she really touched my life, and I'll always remember her, keep her in my memory, and yeah, she was a very good person, very faithful person as well. I know she's in heaven, looking down on all of us and blessing us. Thank you.
I'm Simon's mom, and I'm also the music teacher at St. Lucy's. So when Carol would come to volunteer, sometimes we would have lunch together. And after she stopped volunteering, we stayed friends on Facebook, as Simon said. And she contacted me not long ago to let me know that she had a keyboard that she wanted to donate to the school. So she came to the school again and gave the keyboard to me, which I in turn a few years later gave to a student who was in need of a keyboard, who didn't have a piano but wanted to take lessons. So I was very grateful to Carol for her generosity, not only with her wisdom, as Simon said. I think you also said she was very, she encouraged you to embrace nature, right? She brought in some herbs for you to smell. Even though you couldn't see them, she knew that the senses were really important. And I was very grateful to pass on her generosity with the keyboard for a student in need. So that's just part of Carol's legacy, wonderful legacy.
My name is Chuck Schwartz. My wife and I, Christine, she'll be up here later, I think. We moved to Roxborough in 2001. We bought a house, the only house we've ever owned. And, you know, when you move to a new location, like we did when we came to Philly, then, because Christine had gotten a job at St. Joseph University. She was a grad student there and then was a teacher there professor there for 20 years. You never know who you're going to meet when you come to a new area. But we were familiar with Philadelphia from college days, but we hadn't been back for a long time. Well, we were pleased to find out that around the corner was a community garden, Roxbury United Neighbors Garden Run. And so we said, hey, you know, that's something we should check out, because we were into gardening and we thought that'd be a great opportunity to get to know people. And it sure was, because that's where we met Carol. And I'll never forget how much fun she was from the get-go, as all of you know. And basically over the next 20 years, she became my wife's best friend. And boy, they did so many things together. And I got to be in on a lot of that stuff, which was really cool. And I remember just some things that, as I wrote in the book, I enjoyed every single second I was with Carol. And she let me drive her car, especially when she needed to go to rehab.
She had to clean it before you could, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, the truth be told, she never cleaned. You know that. I find a lot of change in there, dear. Anyway, so, and I remember we got in the habit during the summertime, we get together and play Scrabble and listen to the Phillies. And about the only time I ever heard Carol ever complain about anything was when the Phillies, as they routinely do, blow a lead in the ninth inning. We say, okay, let's get back to the game. It was great playing Scrabble with Carol. Why? Because even though she was trying to win, it never bothered her if she didn't. And I appreciate that, because I'm pretty competitive. The other thing I liked was she made a lot of short words, which was a good setup. So that was a lot of fun. We'd eat popcorn. And of course, we loved each other's dogs. We've always had a dog, and Aunt Carol was our dog's favorite, and we'd come over to there and be with Baxter and the others, you know. It was a lot of fun. But the main thing was our outings, to go see things that were out in the field in nature. We had so many trips. What's the name of the place out there in New Jersey? We could see Atlantic City across the way.
Oh, Forsyth.
Forsyth, exactly. Yeah, we were out there so many times. We had so much fun. One in particular, every 100 yards there would be something fantastic to see. We were just oohing and ahhing and saying, man, isn't it great to be older, but not super old, so we can appreciate all this, you know. And so there was that. The other thing, you know, she would share about Mark and Lorraine and the boys so often, her pride and joy. Linda, we knew was a pride and joy because we got to see her a lot. And so that was really great. She would invite us to come over to her place. She said, I want to make a nice dinner. Let's have dinner. So we would go over there many, many times and have a great, great time. But the one thing I want to finish with is that, you know, it says in the Bible that God creates people to do good deeds. And no one that I've ever met in my life has ever come as close as she did to fulfilling her purpose in life, was to do good. She's an example to everybody that we should all follow.
So I'm Christine Schwartz, his better half. I'm going to have a hard time getting through this because I miss her so much, just like all of you. I think the cruelest thing about COVID is that when someone passes away, that we haven't been able to grieve together. And this has been so long since Carol garden. We really hit it off. And I remember one time we were pulling weeds. We were fulfilling our community responsibility. And we got to talking about heaven. And she affirmed that she believed that Jesus Christ was her Lord and Savior, and that when she died, she would live eternally because of his death on the cross, his shed blood. And so I really want to say that if you feel that Carol is near you, she is, because she has eternal life. And Jesus offered that eternal life to every man, woman, and child who believes in him. So I'm so grateful for my dear friend Carol. I look forward to seeing her again.
I think, as Christine said, that is true, because we've had many signs that Carol's with us every day. This is where Carol actually used to sit in the garden, and I think one of the last photos that was taken, or that I had taken, I came out in the morning and she was sitting there with Baxter, and she was writing either in her diary or a book, or she wrote many letters to people, and she would keep in touch with people, often just offering condolences or encouragement. And I remember her saying, you know, when she retired, it was like, what are you going to do? She said, I am going to be so busy. She said, I couldn't wait to do this, to get up every day and do something different, and give of herself. Anyone else?
I'm a little.
Do you want me to do it from, you want to do it from there?
Yes, well, I need the book that wow. First of all, I am a neighbor of Linda, and I think I can speak up a little bit, maybe I do hold the mic. My name is Betty Mignon, and I come to know Carol, very giving. I would benefit from some of the vegetables that she grew. And Linda, you amaze me. Your mother died December the 8th, if I'm correct. For me, it's the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, a Mary Day. And you were up that first Christmas decorating, and I thought, I asked you why, that you should be grieving